Hi everyone, it's Ileana and I have another card share for you. I'm going to be using a box of goodies that my friend Catherine Pooler sent me. It is her latest stamp of approval Young at Heart collection, and it is just packed full of goodies. I'm going to be using the Winnie and Walter stencil and the Sugar Pea stamp set and the coordinating dies that are in the kit. There's a lot of other stuff in the kit, but these are the only 3 items that I used to make this card. I've already cut apart my dies and I'm just taking out what I'm going to use. I decided to cut the frames out first before my fingers got inky, and I wanted to keep the frames completely white, so I'm going to do that first. I'm going to cut out 4 frames, and I'm just keeping my frames together with a little piece of Post-it tape. And once I get my frames cut out, I will cut out the larger scallop frame with the acetate. I'm adding 1/8 inch score tape around one of my frames, and I'm using the score tape because I don't want any liquid adhesive to smear onto my acetate. And now that that's done, I'm going to move on to my card. I have a piece of white cardstock, and I'm just lining up my piece of cardstock so that the pattern from the stencil is lined up. And I've just used the Post-it tape to hold it down, and now I'm going to put my stencil in the corner of the MISTI. That way, if I mess up, I can just always line it back up into the corner. Just another way that you could use your MISTI. I'm taking a sponge dauber and I'm filling in the diamond pattern with distress ink with the pink raspberry. Now I just have a small piece of cardstock that I'm going to use to do the same thing, and I use that little pink piece of Post-it tape to line up my cardstock so it's in the exact same place as my first piece of cardstock. It is 1/4 inch up from the bottom. I just lined it up with the grid line that's on the base of the MISTI, and I'm going to be using Sponge Sugar Distress ink for that one. Now I've moved my paper over just a little bit so that I can add diamonds in just slightly off, and I'm using Abandoned Coral Distress ink, and that'll give me a nice diamond pattern. I'm adding my little piece of Post-it tape there, that way I know where to put my second piece of cardstock. And now I'm using Adirondack Lights Peach Bellini from Ranger. It's just a lighter peach color, and I'm trying to make this piece just a little bit lighter than the card base. So I've lined up my frame and I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. You could save this little piece for later, but I'm just going to use the interior piece for my card. And when I line it up, the pattern's going to totally match. And now I'm taking my stamps, and because it's a solid stamp and the stamps are fairly new, they're not seasoned, so sometimes I like to use Versamark ink, and it'll help the ink stay on the stamp. There was a little spot on the stamp that had a divot on it, and instead of re-inking it, I just went ahead and used a Fantastics to, I think that's what it's called, to fill it in. I didn't want to restamp it and make it darker than the pink that it was already. I wanted it to coordinate with the pink that was on the base of the card. I get that quite a bit, that sometimes a stamp won't stamp well with the MISTI, and people think that there's something wrong with the MISTI, but when you take a look at the stamp, it's usually something in the stamp. So just keep that in mind if you have trouble stamping one particular stamp. So I've lined up the second part of the stamp set, the little decorative piece, and I'm just inking that up with Yeti ink from Lawn Fawn. And I'm going to stamp it twice just so that it's a nice deep white color on that hot pink. It'll stand out. And the smaller, the medium size cake, I'm using Abandoned Coral, and the distress ink tends to beat up on your stamp, so that's why I went back and I added the Versamark so that it would stamp a little bit more evenly. And now that that's done, I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some Versamark to the top. And with that wet ink, I'm going to add sparkle embossing powder. Not sure what brand this is, but it's just has a little bit of glitter in it. And through the magic of YouTube, I've already heat embossed it, and now I'm moving on to die cutting my cake pieces. Now these dies are designed so that they will cut inside the margins of the cake, so you don't have to spend so much time lining things up and you won't get that little white border around the cake. Now I've taken a scrap piece of foam and I added a piece of 2-inch Elizabeth Craft um, double-sided tape, and I just kind of wrapped it around. That way I don't have to worry about cutting another piece. And I've die cut my foam. I'm going to add it to the back of each of the cake pieces, except I'm just trimming off just a tad off of each piece so that you don't see the cake underneath the cake. And the dies come with this little piece of frosting, and I'm just adding that piece to the top of each cake. You can use the same piece on each slice and then you just trim off the extra piece that's hanging off. Now I'm going to put my card together. I am adding some adhesive to the back of that middle panel and I'm just lining it up, and then I'm going to drop my frame around it. I'm going to use my multi-matte medium to add my adhesive. It's just the easiest way to add the tape instead of tape. And I'm just going to drop my frame right around that little rectangular piece. I'm going to do this twice because it'll just give me just enough room so that my sequence um, can move around after I add my phone tape. I tried it without and there's not enough room. And so I just by adding this one little piece of shim to my card, it helps quite a bit. It also helps line up my foam. And now I'm going to stamp the sentiment. So I have an idea of where I want it to go. So I just kind of centered it and I just used my Misty with some VersaFine ink. And it's easy peasy. And I'm going to add the candle to the top by just simply placing my cake pieces where they should go, and then I will move them and just make sure that my candle is straight. And I do this with both pieces of the candle because it's a two-step candle if you want. And I'm using the same peach Bellini. And now I am stacking up the layers of my cake. It's a little bit of a wonky cake and it's just cute. She did a good job designing it. And now I'm just using the bonus Spectrum Noir marker that came in the kit. I've already added my foam adhesive to the frame, and now I'm adding my sequins. I'm adding some Pretty Pink Posh sparkling clear beads, 6mm ballerina, and 4mm sparkling clear sequins. I never know how much to add to my shaker, so it's kind of a hit or miss. Sometimes there's too much, sometimes there's too little. Now I've removed my backing, and now my shaker card is done. Thanks so much for joining me, and be sure you head on over to my blog, and if you need to order, head on over to mysweetpetunia.com. Hope you have a great day.